Good evening and welcome to the Standing Resolution, the show where we settle the arguments your family dinners never could. I'm your host, Justice Vale, and here is how tonight works. 2 debaters, 1 resolution, and absolutely no mercy for weak reasoning. By the end of the hour, you at home will cast your vote on whether the argument holds up, not whether you personally reach for the pineapple at the buffet, but whether the case was made. Those are, as we'll discover, very different questions. Now, before we begin, one thing worth knowing about this program: neither of our debaters chose their position tonight. Each was assigned a side by random draw before the cameras came on. That matters because what you're judging is the quality of the argument, not the biography of the person making it. A great debater can build a house on sand and make you want to move in. Tonight you'll see if that's possible. So tonight's resolution, read exactly as submitted, is this: pineapple belongs on pizza. One side will stand in favor, arguing that yes, pineapple has earned its place on that dough. The other will stand against, arguing that it has not, and perhaps never will. Belongs.
Let me start with the word justice just flagged, because it's doing all the work tonight. Belongs, not tastes good to everyone, not is traditional, not has been grandfathered in by centuries of Italian nonna approval. Belongs, and that is a much more interesting question. Something belongs on a pizza when it satisfies the underlying logic of what pizza actually is. So let's go back to first principles. Pizza is a platform. It is bread, fat, and heat, designed from the beginning to carry other flavors. That is not an accident of history. That is the entire point. The crust exists to hold toppings. The cheese exists to bind them. The sauce exists to provide a base note of acidity and depth. The whole system is engineered for contrast and combination. Now ask yourself what pineapple brings to that system. It brings sweetness, yes, but more precisely it brings brightness and acid. It cuts through the fat of the cheese. It lifts the salt of the ham or the pepperoni sitting right beside it. That is not a culinary accident. That is the sweet, salty, fatty triangle that shows up in great cooking across every culture on earth. Teriyaki, mole, barbecue sauce, every serious cuisine fig.
Holly's made a lovely speech. I want to engage it seriously because it deserves that, but I think it proves less than it promises. Let's stay with that word, belongs. Holly says something belongs on pizza when it satisfies the underlying logic of the platform. Fine, I'll accept that framework, but then the question becomes whether pineapple actually satisfies it or whether it merely survives on it. Those are not the same thing. Here is what pineapple actually does on a pizza. It releases water, a lot of it. As it heats, it breaks down, and that moisture migrates outward into the crust under the cheese across the very platform we're told pineapple is so well suited to honor. The result is a soggy center, a compromised structure, a base that can no longer do its job. Holly says texture is a problem solved by preparation, but that is a concession dressed up as a rebuttal. When you have to work around an ingredient to make it acceptable, that ingredient is not belonging, it is being accommodated. Now the sweet and salty argument. I don't dispute the principle. Sweet and salty is a real and powerful combination, but the question is not whether sweetness can work near salt.
Both sides just handed each other something to work with. Holly's built a philosophy of pizza, and Mordecai handed it back with a water stain on it. When we return, the rebuttals, and that is where arguments either hold their shape or go soggy. Don't go anywhere, because the best part of any good debate is watching someone answer a punch they didn't see coming. Welcome back, I'm Justice Vale, and you're watching the Standing Resolution, where tonight we are asking whether pineapple truly belongs on pizza. Both sides have staked their ground, and now it's time to see if either can take the others apart. Let's get into the rebuttals.
Mordecai made a sharp argument, and I want to honor it by taking it apart carefully. The water problem. Yes, pineapple contains moisture. So does fresh tomato. So does mozzarella. So does every mushroom ever placed on a pizza. If we banned every ingredient that releases water under heat, we would be eating a cracker with dried herbs on it. The solution in every one of those cases is the same: technique. You manage heat, you manage thickness, you manage placement. Cooks do this every single day. The fact that pineapple requires skill to deploy correctly is an argument for skilled cooking, not an argument for prohibition. Now, the substitution argument. Mordecai says a fig or a balsamic reduction could do the same job with less mess. That's true. And a violin could replace a trumpet. But when you're writing for trumpet, you write for trumpet. The specific brightness of pineapple, that sharp tropical lift, is not interchangeable with the quiet depth of a fig. They are different instruments producing different effects. Saying another ingredient could approximate the contrast is not the same as saying pineapple doesn't belong. It just means pineapple has company. Mordecai's whole cast.
Holly's is a gifted advocate, and I mean that, but I want to name what just happened. The argument shifted. We started with pineapple belonging on pizza. We've arrived at pineapple being manageable on pizza with sufficient expertise. Those are genuinely different claims, and the distance between them matters. On the moisture point, yes, fresh tomato releases water. Yes, mushrooms do. But here's the unglamorous detail Holly's skipped over. Those ingredients have been tested, refined, and integrated into pizza's evolution over generations. Cooks know exactly how to handle them because the tradition absorbed them. Pineapple sits outside that tradition precisely because the accommodation required is ongoing and contested, not resolved. The fact that we are still having this argument is itself evidence that the belonging hasn't been established. The trumpet and violin analogy is genuinely charming, but it assumes we need a trumpet. If the musical piece works beautifully without one, adding a trumpet isn't bold orchestration, it's just noise with good intentions. And here is the deeper issue with Holly's framework. If belonging simply means any ingredient that can be made to work with.
Holly's, you've argued that accommodation is simply what cooking is, that every ingredient requires technique, so technique can't disqualify pineapple. But Mordecai drew a line between ingredients the tradition absorbed and resolved, and one that remains contested. So here's my question. If technique justifies pineapple's place, what ingredient wouldn't that argument justify? Where exactly is your line, and how does pineapple land on the right side of it?
That is exactly the right pressure to apply, and I want to answer it honestly rather than dodge it. The line is this: an ingredient belongs when it serves the core logic of the dish without dismantling it. Gummy bears fail that test not because they're sweet, but because their texture and flavor profile have no relationship to the savory, fat and acid architecture pizza is built around. They don't create contrast, they create confusion. Pickle juice fails because it overwhelms every other element rather than lifting them. Pineapple passes because it does specific, identifiable work. It provides brightness that cuts fat. It creates the sweet-salty tension that serious cooking across every culture has validated. It interacts with the existing structure rather than ignoring it. Mordecai says pineapple merely survives. I say survival with purpose is exactly what belonging looks like for a new ingredient finding its place at a very old table.
Mordecai, you've argued that pineapple's moisture damage disqualifies it, but you also conceded that a fig or balsamic reduction could deliver the same sweet contrast without the structural harm. That concession tells us the problem isn't sweetness on pizza, it's this particular ingredient's behavior under heat. So my question is, if the objection is really about moisture management rather than belonging in principle, aren't you making a case against wet pineapple specifically, not pineapple itself?
That's a fair corner to push me into, and I won't pretend otherwise. Yes, my moisture argument is specifically about fresh pineapple in its typical form as it actually appears on pizza in the real world. I'll own that. But here's what that concession actually reveals. When we say pineapple belongs on pizza, we don't mean some hypothetical dehydrated, heat-stabilized, laboratory-controlled version. We mean the ingredient as it exists, as people reach for it, as it gets layered on by the thousands every Friday night. And in that form, the damage is real and consistent. Holly's wants to judge pineapple at its best-case ceiling. I'm asking you to judge it at its honest average. Most ingredients belong on pizza in their ordinary state without heroic intervention. Pineapple requires the intervention first. That gap between what it is and what it needs to be is precisely where belonging breaks down.
Coming up next is the moment that separates the real thinkers from the performers, the Steelman round, where Holly's has to make the strongest possible case against pineapple and Mordecai has to genuinely defend it. No irony, no winking at the camera. If they do it right, you won't be sure whose side they're actually on. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Standing Resolution. I'm Justice Vale, and if you're just joining us, you've missed a very good argument about moisture and belonging, but you're in time for the strangest part of the night. In the Steelman round, each debater argues the other side's case as well as it can possibly be made. Let's see who means it.
Here is the strongest case against pineapple, and I want to give it everything it deserves. Pizza is not just a platform. It is a language, and like any language, it has a grammar, a set of rules that makes meaning possible. That grammar was built over generations around a specific family of flavors. Fermented dough, cooked tomato, aged or melted cheese, cured or roasted proteins, herbs that thrive under high heat. Every ingredient in that family speaks the same dialect. They were shaped by the same culinary culture, the same climate, the same traditions of preservation and preparation. When you add pineapple, you are not just adding sweetness. You are importing a word from a completely different language and asking the sentence to still make sense. And the honest answer is that sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the tropical brightness doesn't lift the dish. It disorients it. It makes the whole thing feel like two conversations happening at once, neither one finishing its thought. That is a real and serious objection. It is not about moisture or technique. It is about coherence. And I think it is the best argument on the other side. But here is why I still hold my position. Langua.
Holly's built the language argument beautifully, and I want to return the favor honestly. The strongest case for pineapple is not about moisture or technique or sweet-salty chemistry. It is about what pizza actually represents in the world right now. Pizza is the most democratized food on the planet. It crossed every ocean, absorbed every local pantry, and became something different in every city it landed in. Tokyo puts corn and mayonnaise on it. New Haven chars it black and calls that the point. In Brazil, you will find green peas. In India, paneer. Every single one of those variations was once an intrusion. Every single one had a purist somewhere insisting it violated the grammar. And yet the dish survived, expanded, and became richer for the argument. Pineapple is simply the most visible episode in a story that has been happening since the first person outside Naples looked at a pizza and thought, I wonder what I have in my kitchen. To say pineapple does not belong is to say that story should have stopped somewhere before now. And that is a very hard line to defend when the dish itself has never once agreed to stop. That is a genuinely powerful argument, and I have sat with it.
Both sides just did something remarkable. They argued against themselves and came out stronger for it. That is either intellectual honesty or a very dangerous game, and in about 3 minutes you'll find out which. Closing arguments are next, and after that, the resolution lives or dies by your vote. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Standing Resolution. I'm Justice Vale, and we have reached the end of the argument, which means we have reached the beginning of your decision. Closing statements are next, and after tonight, pineapple either belongs or it doesn't. Let's find out which case earned it.
Here is what this debate actually came down to. Mordecai argued, with real skill, that existence is not vindication, and I agreed with him. But then I want to ask, what is vindication? What does it look like when an ingredient has finally earned its place? I think it looks like this. It works. It does specific, identifiable work within the logic of the dish. It creates contrast that neither element produces alone. It has been tested by millions of people across decades, refined by cooks who learned to deploy it well, and chosen freely by an enormous portion of the pizza-eating world. That is not mere survival. That is a track record. Mordecai's best argument was about coherence, about importing a word from a different language, and I took that seriously. But every ingredient pizza now treats as native was once that foreign word. Tomatoes came from the Americas. Mozzarella was once a regional curiosity. The grammar of pizza has always been written by borrowing, and the borrowings that stuck were the ones that did real work. Pineapple does real work. It earns its place through contrast, through chemistry, through the simple fact that the combination creates something neither inger.
Here is what I want you to carry out of this room. Holly's made a generous and genuinely moving case. Pizza absorbs everything. Contrast is good cooking. Belonging is about what you bring, not where you came from. I found myself nodding at more of it than I expected to. But notice what the argument required. It required us to define belonging so broadly that the word loses its edge. If belonging means any ingredient that skilled hands can make work in a tradition that has absorbed everything, then the resolution proves nothing. It simply restates that pizza is flexible. We knew that before we sat down. I have not argued that pineapple tastes wrong to everyone, or that Hawaiian pizza should be illegal, or that the people who love it are mistaken about their own enjoyment. I have argued something narrower and I think more honest. That belonging implies fitness in ordinary conditions, not just peak conditions. That a tradition absorbing something is not the same as that tradition endorsing it. That existence and vindication are different things, and that the difference matters when the resolution asks us to judge, not just to observe. Pineapple is on pizza, that is a fact, whether.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you spend an evening arguing about fruit. What started as a question about pizza turned into something genuinely interesting, a debate about what belonging actually means, how traditions grow, and whether a floor needs to hold before you throw a party on it. I have moderated a great many arguments on this stage, and I will tell you honestly, both of these debaters gave that resolution more than it probably deserved, and I mean that as the highest compliment. Hollis Vega built a philosophy of contrast and showed us that every native ingredient was once a stranger. Mordecai Quill held the line between what exists and what has earned its place and never let go of it. Neither of them blinked. The resolution is better for having been in their hands. But the resolution doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. So go to Paxelle.tv, cast your vote, and while you're there, nominate the next argument you'd like to see settled on this stage. The next resolution is waiting, and it is almost certainly something your family has already ruined a holiday over. One thing worth knowing before you go, the standing resolution features AI personas debate.